Today I had a really hard time motivating myself. I had an idea about a video I wanted to make about a continuous integration tool that I've been thinking of, but I just couldn't get started working on it. Couldn't find any motivation. So I decided to take a walk instead. I've spent a lot of time working with continuous integration tools, and specifically Jenkins. I've used Jenkins a lot at work, and we also use it for timeline. And I've grown more and more frustrated with Jenkins over time. So I've started to think about alternative continuous integration systems and what they might look like. Here's a drawing that I made many years ago where I thought about how I would like a CI system to work for timeline. The biggest problem I had with Jenkins when trying to define this pipeline for timeline was that in Jenkins there is really not an easy way to define a complex pipeline. When I started using Jenkins, it only had sequential jobs, and pipelines were not a thing at the time. So I think the support for pipelines that have come to Jenkins now it's like an add-on to what was previously there, and like this linear sequential feel of a job running is still there. So I would like a CI system to have like a native pipeline definition. Another problem I have with Jenkins is that you can define jobs and pipelines in the GUI, and that's an easy way to get started, but it's not very good in the long run to maintain jobs through a user interface. And there are ways to programmatically define jobs in Jenkins, but again, it feels like an add-on. So a lot of things in Jenkins feels like an add-on, like an afterthought. If you can design a CI system that natively supports pipeline and natively supports things that I find important, I think you can build something much better and with much less effort. So other issues that I've run into when using Jenkins is like workspace contamination. So sometimes workspaces are reused, and maybe there are cached files that make runs pass sometimes but not other times. So that's also a big problem sometimes. Another problem I had with Jenkins is that when you divide your jobs into parts, it's difficult to find the log for a specific part. So maybe the log output from a job is very long, and you're only interested in like a specific bit when like running tests or whatever, and that part is usually quite difficult to find. I think Jenkins is a great tool, and especially I thought Jenkins was great when it came out, or at least when I started using it. And then it feels like the pipeline methodology or the pipeline way of thinking was not there when Jenkins came out, and the features to support pipelines in Jenkins have kind of feels like an add-on. It doesn't feels like an afterthought, and I'm interested to see. My theory is that something can be implemented with much less effort and work much better if you can just strip all the features not necessary for pipelines and just focus on some core features. So that's what I'm interested in exploring. So the idea that I have for a CI system involves two concepts like a pipeline and a stage. And a stage is basically like a bash script running on a server performing a certain task. You can have a few steps doing something in sequence. And those stages can be connected in a flexible way to form a pipeline. So you can have like fan out and fan in. Those are the basic concepts. And when a stage is run, it should be run in an isolated environment. So everything should start fresh and also start like with the same environment every time it's run, so that there can be no so the environment cannot affect the run. That also means that like build artifacts must be passed between stages through like an external database. So one stage might produce like a zip file, and that zip file must be stored away somewhere externally for another stage to be able to fetch it later. So that's also another core idea that I have. And I also want the web user interface to reflect how this pipeline looks. Like you should see something like this in the web GUI. And when you press on a certain stage, you get a log for just that stage. So like a native pipelines, but no more concepts than a pipeline and a stage and how they connect. And also I want everything to be defined in code. Like you define your pipelines and you define your stages in code. There's nothing can be done through the user interface to create and define pipelines. Another feature I'm interested in exploring is to be able to rerun a failed stage. So sometimes the stage might fail because the server was down or because some reason other than like the code running in the pipeline, like the code being tested, or something wrong with that. And in those cases it might be okay to just rerun that particular stage. I don't think this is possible at all in Jenkins. I suspect that if you take the view that stages are like immutable and get all their data from external sources, rerunning might be easier to implement. So that's something I'm interested exploring. Another thing I'm also interested in exploring is like pipeline history. So visualizing when a pipeline changes, like the definition of the pipeline. So say for example, down here, B has been split into B1 and B2. So maybe B was a big test suite and it was split into two smaller test suites. And in this case, if you do this in Jenkins now, I believe that the only thing you will see is the new pipeline or the new. So you will not have a history of what the pipeline looked before, unlike the previous runs. You might have logs from the previous runs, but you don't know what the pipeline looked like previously. I would like to have that visualized in the user interface as well, so you can see what happened to a pipeline more precisely, so you can more easily see what's going on. So again, I don't want to say that Jenkins is bad and you shouldn't use it. It's just that I've had some problems with Jenkins and I'm interested in exploring alternatives. And I think that something that suits my needs could be implemented much easier and with much less effort and produce better results. But then again, I might also be severely underestimating the effort it creates to create something like this. But it's still something that I'm interested in exploring. So today I just wanted to tell you a bit about ideas I have for this CI system, and if you know of any continuous integration system that works kind of like this, I'd be interested to check that out. And we'll see if I get around to prototyping this idea when I've got time for it. So until next time, bye.